The relationship between our money and our mental health is often a complicated one and often a really challenging one. Our money and our mental health interact in a lot of different ways, and that impact can then in turn make it harder to deal with that money problem and to sort of get on top of it, if you like. And then if you add pre-existing mental health issues into that equation, money problems are just going to make that worse. And of course, we know already that if you're already struggling with your mental health, or particularly if you have a long-term mental health condition, there's a decent chance that you're already in some way or another at a financial disadvantage. And it's not just about mental health as such, but it's also about the effect that life events can have. And a lot of these life events that we all have to deal with at some point or another can have both financial and mental health consequences. So if you think about, losing a family member or developing a long-term illness, or maybe being in an accident, or you've been a victim of a crime, things like relationship breakups and losing a job, they can all have an effect both financially and mentally. It can become a vicious cycle. It can spiral. Although there are ways of stopping that spiral, and there are ways of getting out of that cycle. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at two ways in which poor mental health can impact on our finances, and then two ways in which financial problems can affect our mental health. So firstly, some mental health conditions have certain characteristics or symptoms that can cause money problems or make it harder to stay on top of them, such as impulse control, which can lead to unhelpful spending decisions and then in turn lead to debts developing or maybe running out of control. Number two, common mental health issues such as anxiety and depression can make it just a bit harder to do those relatively straightforward tasks, such as researching products and services, communicating with companies and providers, and dealing with financial emergencies. And what will often happen is if we're struggling with our mental health, we might just avoid doing those things or keep putting them off in a way that can tend to lead to them escalating. And so what about the ways in which our finances can affect our mental health? So perhaps the most obvious example is that when we're dealing with finances and they become overwhelming, that can cause a level of stress that can impact our mental health beyond the short term. We might feel overwhelmed. We might feel unable to cope. We might feel alone with all these things. We might even get into quite a dark place and struggle with being able to carry on. And secondly, and this is related, if you're struggling with money, it can be harder to do the things that can keep us in a good place or prevent our mental health from spiraling out of control. So if you're not able to do the activities that you enjoy, if you're not able to go to the places you would normally go to, that might make things a little bit harder, and it might mean it takes longer to recover. And it also means that perhaps if you're struggling with money, you might not be able to pay for this kind of support you need, such as going to therapy. So that's just some examples of the ways in which money and mental health interact. And it really is very much a two-way relationship, which means that at times it can develop into something of a cycle